Hey everyone, it's Mica. Long time no see. I'm so sorry about that. Today we're going to keep on going with Pantheon information, and since races are done, I'm going to move on to classes. But instead of doing multiple classes in one video, I'm going to do one class per video so we could take a closer look at the skills and the abilities that are confirmed. Although, side note, subject to change since the game still is in development. And I'm also going to only be using the abilities listed on the official site because it's official. There is also a wiki that has additional abilities listed, but unless Brad himself is writing that, which I don't think he is, I'm not going to use it. The one thing you're also likely going to notice is I will never mention EverQuest or compare these classes to their equivalents in EverQuest, because I've never played EverQuest. So I may have a different perspective than other content creators. Now, admittedly, I've been playing EverQuest on the Pantheon Plus stream, but I have no idea what's going on. I'm there with a bunch of vets and I haven't been able to explore the world. I have no idea where we are. I have no idea what we're doing. I don't know if there's a boss ahead of us. I couldn't tell you if there's a city nearby. Nothing. I have no clue. I'm basically sitting there looking pretty, admittedly, and hitting buttons while they share memories of their EverQuest days. The first classes I'm going to touch on are tanks, mainly because I don't play tanks, so I have the least amount of knowledge on how they tend to play, which honestly kind of sucks because I always see them swinging these big old axes and swords and such, looking generally pretty badass, but I find tanking boring, frankly, to be honest, so I just don't do it, even though I would love to spin a great axe around my head. I mean, maybe it's just my Viking blood, but oh, that just looks like so much fun. But let's start today with a more classic tank archetype, the Paladin, which in Pantheon are only playable by dwarves and humans. And the basic description, direct from Visionary Realms, goes as followed. Once a cleric themselves, the Paladin has felt a call that transcends the rigid customs of the cleric order. Led by their convictions, the Paladins set off on their own to carry out their righteous judgment as they see fit. At its core, the Paladin is a plate-armored melee specialist imbued with celestial power. This enables them to wield spoken rebukes with awesome effect. In addition, by shedding the dogma of the cleric order, they have devoted themselves to the study of arms and armor, giving paladins renowned ability in defensive combat. Perhaps most iconically, the Paladin is driven by an unquenchable hatred of undeath, a flame they have stoked into a ceaseless pursuit. Thus, a Paladin is never more fierce than when they stand face to face with undeath. Now, this description to me makes them seem like they're more tilted to the zealot side of things rather than that uber goody two-shoes holy knight that we usually conjure in our mind when we think of Paladin. But we'll see when we get more lore, which of course I will cover at some point because you know I love me some lore. But let's move on to how they're going to play. Like the description states, they will wear full plate armor, and they're also going to be able to wield one- and two-handed blunt and edge weapons. Pretty typical Paladin. And I'm assuming most Paladins are going to go sword and board because Paladin. The combat resources they'll use are listed as Wrath and Reckoning points. Now, Wrath is going to be gained by taking damage, killing mobs, and via some abilities, and will be used to execute other abilities. Reckoning points, on the other hand, will be accumulated in combat up to 3 and represented by little suns on your UI. They will also be used to execute heroic feats. When it comes to passive abilities, so for those of you not in the know, are basic abilities that are always active and take no special input from a player, there's not too many listed for Paladin. We have one called Sense on Death, which will cause the Paladin to sparkle when there's undead nearby. Then we have one called Venger's Vow, which makes it so the undead can't stun ya. And finally, we have Lightful Avenger, and this is nifty. So get this. Not only does it give you a bonus to damage against the undead, but you also get a crit hit bonus against the undead. On top of that, you take reduced damage from undead, and every hit point in reduced damage is spread throughout the party as a heal. Now, to elaborate this, to make it easier to understand, if a skeleton would hit anybody else for 100 points, they're only going to hit the Paladin for 80. And that extra 20 points that they're not that they're not inflicting on the Paladin is going to be spread as a heal throughout the party. I mean, come on, that's pretty cool. Granted, this isn't going to be a big heal, but even small heals add up over time, so it's going to be kind of like a minor regen during battles with undead. But it doesn't stop there, because the undead will take damage just by touching you. Oh, and on top of that, Paladins will even get increased wrath gains from undead. So Paladin's going to be pretty damn OP thanks to that bone they have to pick with the undead. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Paladins are also going to have stances in the form of Vengerhams, which are songs I remember from back in the old days of being a cleric. And again, for those of you not in the know, stances, as they're commonly known in a lot of games, are passive abilities that you need to activate. But once you do, they will remain active until you cancel or change them. Now, Paladin has 3 Vengerhams, one of Devotion, one of Justice, and one of Stronghold. Devotion will give all your heals a small bonus regen. Justice will give you back 50% of the wrath cost of an ability if that ability happens to crit. And Stronghold will give your group a percentage of your armor class on top of their own. So these are all going to be very situational, and you're likely going to be swapping through them quite often. And on top of the Vengerhams, the Paladin also has little tunes they can whistle to enhance certain abilities. And these are called Evensongs and will need to be activated just before you activate the corresponding ability. So instead of going through each Evensong individually, I'm just going to mix these in with the abilities themselves so I don't, talk about ability twice. On top of their tanking duties, Paladins, as per the usual, also have minor heals, which are also leftovers from their clerical days. The first one of these is called Oath Flame. It's a light heal that generates wrath. The second one is called Arcing Light, which is a self-heal that will bounce between party members and heal 2 of them at random. Or if Evensong is active, it will heal everybody. It does cost wrath to cast, but it will generate 1 reckoning point. There's also Living Light, which will cost 1 reckoning point, but is a large AoE heal that will heal all party members. And if Evensong is active, it will also inflict damage to all nearby enemies. The final heal is called Glory and Honor, which for a limited time will heal the target you are defending for a certain percentage of all damage you inflict. And again, if Evensong is active, that heal will also be applied to you. Now let's get on into the nitty gritty. And I'm going to split these by type and cost or generation of wrath and reckoning points just to try to give this some sort of semblance of organization. First though, there are 2 abilities that have no cost or generate any wrath or reckoning. One is called Incite, which is an enmity increase that makes your target focus on you for a brief amount of time. I'm making the assumption this is your first tank ability. I'm not entirely 100%, it's just an assumption. There's also the Edict of Celestial Authority, which is an unresistible stun. Unless, of course, your target is completely immune to stun. Then it's completely resistible. We also have both abilities and attacks that will generate wrath, although not a lot of them. But you also got to remember that this is basically just bonus wrath. You're also going to be getting it from combat and taking damage as well, so it's doubtful these abilities are going to have to be spammed. Then again, it will also depend on cooldowns and exactly how much wrath you actually gain from standard tanking. The first of these attacks is Fervent Strike, which is a powerful melee attack, but if used on a target that's stunned, it's also not only guaranteed to crit, but will also generate a big ol' amount of enmity. The second one is Lance of the Lightful, which creates a bolt of celestial light which will impale an enemy and has a high chance of stunning them, if they are running away. So much for the honor typically associated with Paladins. Nothing says integrity like hitting a mob with a bolt of light as they're running for their life.
Killing equals honor.
Then we also have abilities that generate wrath while either buffing your party or debuffing your enemies. Fiery Angus sends a wall of flame forward that will purge you of poison and disease and knock your enemies flat on their backside. The next one is Burning Angus, which will cause a celestial light to burn your enemies, but instead of generating damage over time, it generates enmity over time. Then finally, you have Brilliant Angus, which is like a holy flash bomb, blinding your enemies or just lighting up the room momentarily. My only fear with this one is that Paladins are going to get really, really annoying with this. I mean, if that animation is flashy at all, it's going to be like a discotheque. Just... The bulk of a Paladin's abilities seem to be ones that cost Wrath, which is why I make the assumption that Wrath at least will generate fairly steadily while in combat. Using Wrath-based abilities is also the only way to generate Reckoning, like Knight's Persuasion, which is the only non-combat ability listed that uses Wrath. And what it does is it will make a normally aggressive target momentarily friendly, and if successful, not only will it give you 50% of the Wrath that you used to cast it back as a little extra bonus, but it'll also generate 1 Reckoning. But if you choose to fight, Light Guard will increase your block if you're using a shield, or parry if you're using a two-handed sword, and both will stun. Pummel and Cross is a strike with the pommel of your weapon that is immediately followed by a sweeping AoE strike that of course has a chance to stun. Now, side note here. Paladins seem to be stun tanks more than anything. I haven't really gone too deep into the other tanks, but the amount of stuns is insane for Paladin. It makes me think that stun locking mobs might be a thing, which is scary because why have tactics if you can just stun lock? And even if they have something built in that has a mob gain a resistance to stun over time, it's going to be, you're not going to be able to use a lot of moves because everything stuns. It's like, I don't understand why everything stuns. It doesn't make any sense to me. They're just not, I mean, a job should have 1, maybe 2 stuns at max. There's no reason to have so many stuns. It's just, I mean, I really hope they rethink this and kind of drop some of these stuns because it's just overkill at the moment. And it's gonna be, yeah. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to these Wrath using abilities, because the next one is called Glorified Self, which sends out a shade of yourself to distract an enemy for a short amount of time. Then there's also Miraculous Shimmer, which does the same thing, but also makes you dash to defend the nearest person in your party that's low on health. And if you include an Evensong with Miraculous Shimmer, you're going to heal that person as well. Then you also have the Chastening Blow, which is an effect added to your weapon that will strip away profane or curse-related buffs from whatever you're attacking. And finally, we have the Edicts, which use Wrath to execute but will generate Reckoning points. Celestial Fury will reflect an attack, magical or mundane, back at the attacker. Celestial Force will knock back your opponent, while Celestial Might will pull them to you. At the moment, there are only 3 abilities listed that will cost Reckoning points. Costing 1, we have Golden Angus, which will make you invulnerable to attack for a short amount of time, and the aforementioned Living Light. There's also a Tone, which costs 2 Reckoning and 50% of your max HP to raise someone who has fallen. Now, this one also has some drawbacks. You cannot be healed, for instance, for a short amount of time after you use it, and if you're under 50% HP already, it's going to reduce you to 1 little lonely hit point. And since you cannot be healed, this makes you pretty damn vulnerable, especially as a tank. It can also be augmented with Evensong to raise a target with more health and mana, but the Evensong does nothing for the debuffs. That almost covers Paladin. There is just one more ability, which will cost you both Wrath and Reckoning, and that is called Hallowed Assault, which strips the mark of the High Mortal from your enemies. Now, what this is going to do exactly, or how this is going to affect combat, I have no idea at this point. But if I find out more in the future, I will either include it in a future video, or maybe if it's brief, I will just tweet it out. So look for that, because eventually it's going to come out, and eventually I will, get that information out there. So, like most Paladins we're familiar with, the Pantheon Paladins are your typical Holy Knight that uses a combination of Celestial abilities and stuns, which, like I said, kind of worry me. They also rely on blocks and parries to mitigate incoming damage. This is your classic tank, which isn't a surprise, since it is Paladin after all. Nothing here jumps out as having its own spin or having something that's completely different from what we're used to. Again, things can change at this point. It is not even in alpha yet. And this is also likely not a complete list of what a Paladin can do, so it's going to be interesting to see if they add anything or have anything that will shake things up a little bit. On the bright side, if you like playing a traditional tank, Paladin seems like it's going to be pretty dang perfect for you. But that's all I have for Paladin. Next time I will continue with more tanks and cover the Dire Lord, so be sure to like, subscribe so you don't miss it. And like I said, I will be making a video dedicated to each individual class, so if you're looking to find out more about the classes of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, this is the place to be. I have my social media linked below if you want to follow me, and I also have Pantheon linked below in case you want to find out more about this wonderful, wonderful game. And as per the usual, it has been a hoot. Until next time, have fun.
Onward!